Thank you for that introduction. I am very excited to be here with Ms. Venus Goodwine today, the Department of the Air Force Chief Information Officer. I am Lauren Knausenberger, just coming out of that same job in June. And it's a pleasure to now get to spend some time with Ms. Goodwine in her role as the DAF CIO. Venus, it's great to see you today. How's it going?
Good morning. It is always exciting to have a chat with you, Lauren, my friend, my colleague, definitely my fellow game changer. I'm going to call us that. Having now followed you in this role, I want to say right up front, thank you for setting a path for me. I'm excited about continuing the things that you have started, and then having the opportunity to really put my little twist on it as well. But I wanted to just tell you, thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate it. And you are definitely the right person to jump into this job. And we have a good history together. I would love for you to share with our viewers a little bit about your journey, because you have had an incredible journey: uniformed military, reserve, civilian, industry. So you just have a really incredible background getting to this point. And if you could throw in kind of where we met, I think that would be a fun part of the story as well.
Well, thank you. That's interesting. You're right. I have had really enormous amount of opportunities. And I like to tell people when I'm speaking to them, some that were afforded to me and some that I just created. My husband was active duty military. He retired. And so we ended up living in Japan for 10 years. And so it was at that time in 2006, I said, one day I'd like to be a CIO. And no kidding, I started to chart this course to doing that. Well, along that journey, I came to the headquarters staff. If you remember, I was in uniform at that time. And really the reason I came to staff is because I had just finished a CIO graduate certificate program with the University of Maryland. And I wanted to get some really on-hand experience in a CIO organization. So I put on my uniform for 4 years and came to the staff, and voila, that's where you and I met. I was Major Goodwine at the time, soon then turned promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, but you had come on as the Chief Innovation Officer, a highly qualified employee, bringing all that great industry experience. And I remember when we met, because always coming from industry, it's a little different coming into DOD, right? And in any of the military departments, because we do things a little bit different. However, not so different that you can't come from the outside and be successful. And I think you proved that. And so when we met, it was I think our initial focus was, how do we make this risk management framework thing easier to be used by our operational community, but also staying in line with the intent of the risk management framework, which is, as we both know, is just understanding the posture of any software application that's going to be connected to our system. And so I'll tell you, you came in guns a-blazing and blaring, and that was great, and really made some changes and opened our eyes. And so from you, I really had the opportunity to get that view from the outside in, even though I had been in industry myself, but at different levels and in different spaces than you. And so I think our partnership there is where it began. And then I left, and you were still here. I left and went to USDA to be the Chief Information Security Officer. And then you became the CIO. And I was like, wow. So, I was cheering from you from the outside, because I could say I know her when. And then when the opportunity came for me to come back and work for you, trust me, I ran towards the opportunity and prepared myself so that I can prevail and get selected. And I did. And so then working as Director of Enterprise IT, really executing your vision, within one of the 3 directors here in the organization. And so I think that not only we met, we started at particular points in our career, but what I like is how we ended up. Me following you in this seat that's a story in and of itself.
It is. And, I remember from Major Goodwine and Colonel Goodwine, definitely you helped keep me out of a lot of trouble, for sure. because I did want to really shake things up, and we shook a lot of things up together. But you also were really good at reminding me, hey, we have to write some things down, and
Yeah.
we do sure that this goes into the process, and this is how this will stay and have lasting effect in this building. And I'm so glad, with your knowledge, you have the mission and the technology, but you also really know how the building works, and you can kind of make a lot of these good things stick. So that's exciting. I think it's exciting for me, and it's exciting for our Air Force. Why don't you tell us a little bit though about a time in your career when maybe you weren't sure you were going to be a CIO one day. Maybe you didn't know yet. You hit some real challenges and you had to overcome something. You have arrived, but I'm sure you didn't always know. So share a little bit of that with us.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I had what I call in my career, the term is a diminisher. And again, anyone that knows me know I have somewhat a little A-type personality about things. I'm kind of rules driven, and you and I know that because those times where we, I like to say, had healthy tension, it was because I was trying to stick to the rule, and you were saying let's innovate, and then I think we ended up making that marriage work between the two. But in my career, mostly as a civilian, I worked for the United States Marine Corps and in Japan, and my role there was to execute the NMCI, the Navy Marine Corps Internet, then became the Next Generation Enterprise Network. And I had a leader that I worked for. And I remember saying, hey, I want to do something different. At the time, I had done that, for all of the overseas installations, and I was coming back to the States. And I said, I heard about this thing called being an SES. I'm interested in that. So I'd like to broaden the aperture of my role. And I remember the words he said to me, and it was, good luck with that. And I thought, what? Good luck with broadening my role, or good luck with being an SES? And he was like, yeah, that doesn't happen. And I thought, wow. But what I will tell you, I call him a diminisher because if you actually study the term, there's a whole book about it. It's just those individuals, and he meant really no harm. He was, I think, articulating what he saw. But what it did was fueled me. It's like, okay, how do I then overcome this? And I like to tell people, every time someone puts a barrier in front of you, it just really becomes an opportunity for you to be innovative to get around or over that barrier. And sometimes you may have to go under it. And I like to think that when I ran into those types of situations in my career, that's what I did. And I did it the innovative way. It was meaning I had to take a career broadening assignment, to move an organization, or I had to take an assignment out of my comfort zone. And so I've kind of used those things to bring me back to the goal that I ultimately had. But I've had that a couple of times. People told me no, that I couldn't do something. And really they were speaking from their own frame of reference, but not knowing that I believe that the culture and the organization was ready to change, just that individual was not. And so the moral of the story is don't let people tell you no that don't have the authority to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was there anything in that experience? Sometimes people just, say stuff and you definitely have to push it out. But then
Right.
sometimes people will say something and you have to kind of decide, am I going to internalize this? And, is there something to learn here? Or is this, you're just hitting at my shell and I just don't need that right now.
Yep.
Was there anything in your career where you were just like, hey, I learned something just now about myself, and this is going to be kind of a pivot point that kind of grows me? Did you have any experiences like that?
No, that was it. Lauren, you hit on it because when someone says that to you, it does force you to take a look at yourself. It's like, is he saying that, as I stated, because he thinks I'm not qualified? And maybe my goal is too high. Maybe I should go sit down and be happy being an NH4, and maybe I've set my sights too high. And so it caused me to reflect. And so I tell people, you have to do self-reflection. And one thing I like about me is I'm very self-aware. I know my strengths, but I know my areas of improvement as well. And so I try to work on those. But what I have learned really is I allow people to have their opinions. but not let them force me to form a different opinion about myself as a result. But that has come with time, right? If you had asked me that, not Venus Goodwine where I am today, but if you asked me that Venus Goodwine maybe 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, that may have been a different story. And so sometimes people say things to you and it kind of shakes you at your core, but I will tell you, self-reflect. I've started this thing as I've been speaking, as I'm telling, when I speak to women about leadership and having a seat at the table, I always tell them to have a mirror with them. And they're like, what? I said, that mirror is not for you to check your lipstick in the middle of a meeting. That mirror is for you every time you're sitting in a space and you feel like you don't belong. I want you to look at that mirror on the sly and remind yourself that you're there because you should be and you earned to be there. And so really to answer your question is, yes, I've been shaken at my core, but through maturity and time, and I will say good mentorship and coaching, I have now become very self-aware and I know how to deal with those things a little differently now than I have in the past.
I think a lot of folks, will be really encouraged to hear that. And I'll share from my own experience too. It's probably been the last 15 years that I've really, or maybe even 10, that I've really felt, just very confident in my own skin. I know who I am. I know where I'm strong. I know where I'm weak. I remember just being in my 20s and even early 30s, just, feeling like I have to be perfect all the time and almost not myself professionally. And then, it's wonderful the day when I just realized, what, I'm going to be me all the time and I'm going to bring all of me. And I think it's been good, and it takes different people a different amount of time to be able to arrive there. So you've been in your job 6 months now, which in CIO time is actually a long time.
Yes.
But but in a lot of jobs, it's probably before you even feel up to speed. Good thing you had a rolling start with some prior jobs. But has it gone as expected? Any surprises? I would love to hear, especially your biggest surprise.
I will tell you, has it gone as I expected? You know what? I'm going to say yes to that. And here's why. Because the people, right? And because I was within the organization and in a directorate, and so I knew the people and I knew my counterparts, right? And I always tell people, it's so funny. It's like when you come from the organization, you know where the bodies are buried, and that's good. But also when you come from the organization, you now become the they that everyone talks about. I wish they would fix this and I wish they would do that. Well, I am now they. And so I'm very aware of that. And so coming into the seat, what has surprised me, to be honest, is the shift in the responsibility of the CIO. And let me explain, because you had the same responsibility, but I think what's a little different is we now have this great thing called the Great Power Competition. Our Secretary of the Air Force has really focused on, if you ask him what's his priority since he's been here, he will tell you three things, right? China, China, China. And so what that's done for the CIO organization, myself, my leadership, and all of the team is really to have us focus on, are we doing things that actually are preparing us if deterrence fails and we have to switch to a conflict? And why that matters is because IT is an enabler. There are some people that want to put the CIO in a box and say, yes, go do compliance things, FOIA and privacy. While all those things are very important, if you think about our platforms, our air breathing platforms today, or if you think about all the things that the Air Force and the Space Force bring to a fight, it requires IT. So the CIO role is huge. And the secretary and the undersecretary and the both chiefs have really spoken up about where are we with our IT. And so that it's a surprise, not in that I didn't know, but what's surprising is, wow, the responsibility now that I have is very big. And in that, the first week in the seat, again, even though I came from the organization, my first week in the seat, You know what I did? I got on the phone with the MAGCOM commanders. You remember them, right? Our 4 stars that make the Air Force go round. And I asked them, what do you need from me as a CIO? And you know the things they told me, right? They said, hey, you know what? Um, I need to make sure that I have data. I need data to be readily accessible. I was like, great, I have a CDAO that's going to help me do that. He said, I need resilient infrastructure. I said, great, I have a program that's going to help me do that. They said, and I need to make sure that it's all that available at a time and place of my choosing. And more importantly, having data that can traverse all multiple domains. And I said, great, that falls within my wheelhouse. Because as you know, I have the CISO that works for me. I have the CDAO that works for me. And then of course, Director of Enterprise IT. So putting that together, those were my marching orders. And so being in the seats for 6 months, we've had to reframe how we look at the problem. I spent a lot of time making sure everyone understands the why. What does it look like to be ready for a great power competition? Because we're re-optimizing for that. And that really is, do I have the right people with the right skill? Do I understand the requirement? Am I agile in the delivery of the capabilities that enable the warfighter? But you only know those things when you talk to the warfighter. And so I've spent a lot of my time going to some of the warfighter things. You know, rather it's a command and control conference, rather it's a warfighter symposium. So I get to actually hear from the warfighters and spending time with the MAGCOM commanders. And then I come back to my team. And so there's a renewed sense of urgency here. Yes, all the things that we normally do to run the business still happen, but there's some extra things we need to do to re-optimize for great power competition. And so that's a little bit of our new focus. So again, being in the organization, so the past 6 months, like you said, I had a running start, so I wasn't new to the organization, but was new is being in the organization now as we re-optimize great power competition. It requires a different look, but I'm happy because I did wear the uniform, and so I definitely understand the warfighter. And it also opened some doors for me because I had relationships with people that are the actual warfighters and own the requirements. So that's what I think has somewhat been the surprise for me. And the key, and you know this, communication. People have to understand the why. And when they understand that, I think they have a renewed sense of accomplishment in the organization.
Yeah, I agree. That has definitely been something that I think was probably the most fun part for me was being able to solve for MAGCOM commanders, get out to safety and just do really good stuff for General Harigian. During my tenure, it was just,
Yes.
it was, I think one of the things that made me feel just, I don't know, be most mission impactful was some of the things that we actually did together for General Harigian out there about a year before everything went wild in Ukraine. And, kind of looking at that and realizing, hey, that, a CIO of a military service can make a real difference in a battle through that forethought and through that partnership was really big. And so I love that. I love that in the Department of the Air Force, the CIO truly does have a seat at the table. Is in the mission. Is in the the WEPTAC C2.
Yes.
Now, I was never particularly great at the compliance side of those things myself. I was so glad that we had people that did, but yeah, we have a warfighting CIO organization, and that's something that is a little bit different, especially about those military department CIOs. You have to live in both worlds. You're not just kind of keeping up a business network. So it's a big job. All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about people for a minute. So you have a very large cyber workforce. I think something around 24,000 people that you have to kind of care for in that community, while also providing service to 750,000 airmen and guardians.
Yes.
And then, over 1 million if you bring in contractors, dependents, multiple levels of classification, all of those things. It's a lot of folks. And you have probably a lot of the same barriers as commercial companies bringing in cyber talent, software developer talent. How are you dealing with talent in general in the world's greatest Air Force at this moment?
Yes, I will tell you. You're right. And so I'm fortunate, as you mentioned, our workforce consists of our military, our civilians, and our contractors. So that civilian piece falls under me. And so in partnership with the DoD CIO, we have embarked upon, as a result of the DoD workforce strategy, how do we do talent management better? And so I was last week at AFA, and I had the first DoD Chief Talent Management Officer on a panel with me, Brent Parmeter, and he talked about this new way of supply and demand for talent management. On the same panel was Mark Gorak, who actually leads our defense cyber workforce strategy implementation. And so what does that mean for the Air Force? First, it means, what talent do we need? And so once you identify the work that needs to be done in order to re-optimize for great power competition, you have to ask, well, what skills do I need in order to do that? And so identifying the talent is the first piece in doing that. And once I identify the talent, how do I make sure it's easier for them to come and be a part of, as you say, the world's greatest Air Force? And so we're working on things like making sure that our hiring process right now, it'll probably take 80 days. Industry, it takes 40. We're trying to get to 60 this year. And then the year after that, get down to 40 days. And we mean butts in seat with the computer on day one, not just you have your final job offer. So we had a tabletop exercise looking at our hiring process. It's like, I've identified this talent, I want to bring it on, but I'm losing talent because my process is so buried in bureaucracy and processes. So we work with the DoD Chief Talent Management Officer with the tabletop and really identified some of those barriers that were the long lead time, security clearance issues, or having to get a drug test, for instance. And so that was the other way. The other thing, so yes, I identify the talent and I figure out a faster, better way to bring them on. But the other issue is pay parity. And so I don't compete in my talent. Yes, I compete with industry, but do you also know I compete within the Air Force as well? Because we have different pay systems. You can be a GS. If you're Intel, you could be part of the DCIPs, or you could be part of the Cyber Accepted Service, or you could be part of acquisition demo. And so you have all these different pay systems. And so how do we ensure parity just within across those different pay systems? And so that's another thing that we've tackled as well from the cyber, specifically from a cyber and IT perspective, is how do we use the Cyber Accepted Service to bring on industry so that we have that parity, but also even within, how do we pay them for the skills that they have? And I mean demonstrated skills that we will assess through assessments. And, of course, credentialing is very important, and college degrees are still important. But that pay parity was also a piece that we had to deal with. But also what we've realized is, you don't have to come into DoD or in the Air Force as a civilian, and we used to call hire to retire. Maybe you're industry and you say, hey, I want to do a good deed. I want to go work, in the Air Force for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. We allow you to come in and go back. But also, if you're a civilian and maybe you have 20 years and you say, I want to do a stint with industry to broaden myself, we'll allow them to do exchange as well. So using these exchange programs also has been another way for us to make sure that we can retain our talent by reskilling them and upskilling them and giving them opportunities outside their normal day-to-day jobs. So, I identify the talent, and yes, I make sure that I can bring the talent on quickly. I understand pay parity, but I also understand that you have breadth and depth of experience is important, because what we're looking at from an IT perspective today is not the same thing we looked at 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? I'm looking at software defined networks, which is something new that we're embarking upon, but it's not taught in our schoolhouse. So how do I make sure that my airmen and guardians get that type of expertise? I allow them to do exchange programs with industry. And then I also allow industry to come in so they can bring to us some skills that we don't have. And so it's a whole concept of talent management that starts with acquisition and then acquiring the talent and identifying the talent. But the other piece of that is when someone wants to leave, we hold their place so that when they want to come back, they can. So making that easier as well. And then from a cyber perspective, as you know, you've watched the news just like me. You just heard on the FBI, Chris Wray and some others speak about this living off the land, right? That's affecting a lot of our critical infrastructure. So, how do I train my staff to understand this new way of providing cyber protection? That comes with a whole of nation effort. And so, we work a lot with our industry, one, to understand the skills that they have and how we leverage those skills, but also the industry that supports us, we hold them to the same standard of skills as well. And so now we have, this lexicon of skills. We call it our workforce framework, but really it's this entire lexicon that no matter who you are, where you are, based on the role that you perform, no matter where you go, that role is the same. And the knowledge for that role is the same. So it's that long-winded answer to say for talent management is key.
Agreed. And you've got quite an enterprise to manage over there, and we're glad that there's a lot of really good rigor. And
Mhm.
some of the things that I saw in the Department of the Air Force, as I'm looking from the private industry side for things like vectoring people and true talent management, there are a lot of really good best practices actually that large businesses or even small businesses can follow, that folks might not actually be aware of as much. The military uh, does a really good job at kind of helping people to get where they need to go for that mission. Um, so I want to talk about AI for a moment. I know
Yes.
this is your top priorities to leverage AI in a practical way to advance the mission. What is your approach to AI implementation, and which missions are you most excited about applying AI and related tools to?
Oh, that's great. So just like everyone else, when all the large language models became available, everyone jumped into the pool, but they didn't understand the temperature of the water, right? If you allow me to use that analogy. And so it's like, wait, hold on. Let's make sure we understand better of how we want to use AI. And in this context, I'm speaking just of large language models because we've had artificial intelligence throughout the department already. So I put it into one of two categories. I'm focused on what I call everyday AI, and then I'm focused on game changing AI, right? That everyday AI is those things that I can do, kind of cognitive, that helps my airmen and guardians and even leadership um, get make better decisions using the AI, or things that I can do to help make their job easier so they can do some of the higher level work. We started this with robotic process automation, right? Let the bots do certain things. And so now we can have our individuals do high order work. It's the same thing with everyday AI. If all I need is the first draft of a paper, because that's what action officers do in the Pentagon, AI could do that, right? I could train a large language model to create that first draft. If I need to classify a position description, which we know is one of the things, lone pole in the tent, that we found out during our tabletop exercise, I could train AI to do that as long as you have enriched data. And what I mean by that is enriched, meaning I have the data because I'm a data rich organization, but now the enrichment comes when I apply the rules to it. Back to my example of position classification. If I'm going to classify a position, not only do I have the data of all the positions that are available, I also have to make sure that the LLM understands the rules that come into doing a classification. So that's the everyday AI that we're working on. And I'll talk to you about a landing zone that we've created in our Azure tenant to do that. But it's this game changing AI which is totally different because that is the type of AI that requires a larger investment, but also a total shift in culture. And when I talk to the PACAF commander and I ask him, what are your AI needs? He says, targeting. So how do I use artificial intelligence to help him with targeting? Because what is targeting, right? It is give me courses of actions on that I should take based on a target. Or and so as one way of game changing AI. So how do you use AI to do that? But the key there is that can't be something that I use an open source in the internet kind of model. I need it to be trained on specifically on my data in the confines of my own organization where I can protect what is being trained and learned by the LLM. And so we make a distinction between those things. So how am I doing that? One, I created what we call an innovation landing zone. Our vice chief at the time, but now our chief of staff of the Air Force, has an innovation program he calls Project Holodeck. And it's one of those is, hey, every airman can code. And how do we implement that in this environment? But we did it so that they could use some of the innovation that we're trying to bring to bear for the warfighter, rather that's, our Azure Virtual Desktop or our large language models, generative AI in our Azure environment. And we did that. And so we were able to allow our, I had a guard that said, hey, I have a problem I need to solve. And he went into our landing zone, which is within our Microsoft tenant, which is IL5, and was able to generate a mesh network that he needed for so he solved the operational problem in my innovation landing zone. And so those are the type things that I'm using to bring AI to bear, is putting people in a safe place where they could actually I don't want to say exercise, but kind of create and innovate. And then once it becomes something that's usable, then we make the decision rather than something that's scalable. And so again, looking at AI, two different ways, the kind of the everyday AI that we'll use that'll help with kind of productivity and help individuals do their work faster. But then that game-changing AI that I know is going to help the warfighter at the edge. Because one of the things we talk about is so much data comes from sensors in the Air Force, and we need to be able to get through that data and make sense of that data so that we can act. And so I'll have to do that game-changing AI there, but I have to have the confidence in the decisions and the choices that are provided by AI. So that has been my approach. I have a chief data and AI officer and a whole organization that's helping me do that.
Awesome. And Venus, Ms. Goodwine, DAF CIO, it has been fantastic to do a chat with you today. I know we need to get you down to the Secretary's office
Yes.
to continue making sure that the CIO is supporting great power competition. But I really appreciate you taking time to chat with me, go down memory lane a little bit. And it's been really fun. Thank you so much.
No, Lauren, thank you. I appreciate it again. Thank you for laying the foundation that you did. I take the baton on this relay and really to move the ball forward, and so that whoever I pass the baton will also continue. So thank you to you and the other CIOs that came before you, but I find it a sheer pleasure to be able to enable the warfighter of the Air Force and the Space Force. So thank you for this opportunity to talk about some of the things that we're doing.
It is definitely a challenge, even in the world's greatest air and space forces.
The world's greatest air and space forces.